Hi, my name is Mille.
And my name is Emil.
And we are really excited to welcome you to a digital ONS 2020.
We are standing here in Stavanger, of course wishing you were all here with us. But most importantly, we hope that all of the ONS network is safe and healthy wherever you may be around the globe.
So what can the audience expect when ONS goes digital this week?
Well, what brings us together is energy, which is why ONS aims to bring you the latest within business opportunities, updated energy knowledge, and innovative technical solutions for ways to produce energy in a safe and sustainable way.
And speaking of together, this is the main theme of ONS 2020 and will be a red line throughout this entire program.
Throughout this week, you will have the opportunity to follow more than 50 energy experts, analysts, and industry leaders when they share their views on the most pressing energy-related topics.
And first up is the leader of the ONS Conference Committee and SVP in Total, Mrs. Manouelle Lepoutre. Let's go to Station F, the world's biggest startup incubator in Paris,
where we will hear Mrs. Lepoutre's opening remarks on how togetherness can help us solve the dilemmas of the energy industry.
Today I'm very happy to welcome you to the Station F, here in central Paris. This is the world's biggest startup campus. Here is a broad entrepreneurial ecosystem gathered under one roof to grow and develop new ideas. To me, this is the perfect illustration of the ONS 2020 main theme, Together. ONS gathers the energy industry. Energy is key to people's life and welfare, but we are facing dilemmas that we need to resolve. Climate change is a key issue on top of the agenda, and ensuring access to clean, affordable, and reliable energy for the world's population is a great challenge for mankind too. How can we develop the cleanest kinds of energy system and phase out the ones that are not efficient and have more impacts on climate? How do we make a positive impact for individuals, communities, and the environment? In addition, we see increasing social inequalities contributing to unstable social and geopolitical climate. We see greater uncertainty and higher volatilities in energy markets. The threat of economic and commercial disruption is constantly looming. The biodiversity is being threatened at an unprecedented speed. How can we act in unison to stabilize the situation? I think our industry has to evolve. We can lead and participate to the foundation for coordinated solutions to address all those challenges, but not alone. As energy companies, our responsibility together with governments, companies, and civil society is to ensure access to clean, affordable, and reliable energy for the world's population. But companies can't decide what's responsible and what isn't on their own. It's by listening to input from others that together we'll have a true meaning. Together with the civil society, the institution and the business community, we must foster openness and transparency when seeking innovative and sustainable solutions. And also when making commitments to corporate citizenship and future generations in communities and regions where we operate. For me personally, it was important that this year ONS reflected the spirit of collaboration and dialogue through the Together theme. The energy industry is not unaccustomed to change, but we are now facing a reality far more complex than ever before, and with completely new facets. Now last with the global COVID-19 pandemic. Today we're here virtually due to the COVID-19 situation, not allowing us to be physically together. But if anything, this crisis has shown us more than ever how essential it is to join forces seeking collective solutions. Companies, along with governments and associations, have stood side by side on the front line in the fight against coronavirus. Factories started producing hydroalcoholic gel and masks. Emergency funds were unlocked, and business continuity was ensured while complying with the most stringent safety standards. This sanitary crisis has also revealed tremendous solidarity and creativity at every level of the society. Going back to me being at Station F, this is an inspiring community of collaboration to innovate. For example, on the mobility topic, the Move Lab Accelerator incubates startups to support the transformation in today's mobility services, to save energy and to use cleaner energy. Startups are very close to the civil society. Here we have some non-profit innovative organizations as La France s'engage and get support and advice from corporate partners like Total to help accelerate their business solutions. This creates values for all parties involved. I want to close with something that lies close to my heart. For me, being together also means uniting diverse people as different generations. Every generation has its tune to bring to the building, but it is particularly crucial to listen to the young people to help the energy sector to transform. Young people have the ability to move quicker, faster, and change the habits of today's business. We must give them the opportunities. And I am proud of the young people who have chosen the energy industry to act to solve one of the greatest challenges for mankind, namely the energy transition. We need them, and we want them too. To close, I am an energy optimistic, and I believe energy can be delivered to everyone in a sustainable manner by innovating, by making tough decisions and taking urgent actions. We call upon governments, industry, companies, and individuals to come together and reinvent the term joint venture. Let us contribute and cooperate to create a new energy future. Together.
It's clear to us that we're facing tough dilemmas when wanting to give access to clean, affordable and reliable energy for all. But as Mrs. Lepoutre is pointing out, collaboration will prove to be the strongest strategy. Over to our next guest. Leading a nation in times of rapid change is a job I truly admire and respect. How to meet climate change with urgent actions? How do you secure jobs, welfare and income for the country's inhabitants? But also, how do you keep them healthy when a global pandemic hits us? It's a great pleasure for me to introduce to you the Norwegian Prime Minister, Mrs. Erna Solberg.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of the oil and gas sector, today the ONS kicks off. But the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the rules. The ONS is digital this year, and my contribution is this recording. The pandemic harms individuals, economies and societies all over the world. It has changed our lives. It has changed how to do business and how to cooperate. International cooperation and solidarity are more important than ever. Hence, the ONS headline, "Together," is spot on. We must also combat the pandemic together, both at a national and an international level. Despite the pandemic, some challenges and opportunities remain the same. The world needs more energy and lower emissions. Changing the huge and complicated global energy system is going to take time. Within the targets of the Paris Agreement, there will be a significant demand for oil and gas for decades ahead. In a low-carbon future, lower emissions from the production of oil and gas will be important, and one area where Norway will continue to contribute. I am therefore encouraged by the ambitious targets set by the Norwegian oil and gas industry to cut emissions and to aim to reach near zero by 2050. We have experienced that putting a price on carbon works. The average carbon footprint of production per barrel on the Norwegian continental shelf is about half the global average. More Norwegian gas can contribute to a lower carbon future by substituting coal and by being converted to hydrogen with carbon capture and storage. On the 12th of June, the royal decree, the areas Utsira Nord and Sørlige Nordsjøen 2 were open for offshore renewables. The areas, totaling over 3,500 square kilometers, will allow for technological development in alignment with global climate targets. The corona pandemic has put the petroleum industry in a very demanding situation. Our parliament has adopted a package to help maintain activity, employment and competence in the industry throughout this crisis. We have a clear expectation that the oil companies will act upon these measures and bring new projects forward to maintain activity across the value chain. The energy and climate challenges can only be solved on a global scale. And the same goes for COVID-19. More than ever is global cooperation called for. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Prime Minister Erna Solberg. It's interesting to hear how she expects the COVID-19 pandemic to fundamentally change the way we do business and the way we cooperate. She also points out the challenge of providing even more energy to the world and at the same time in a low-carbon manner. Building on this, a company that's in the midst of its transformation of energy, building bridges between oil and gas and renewables, is Equinor. I'm super excited to enter this building to have a small chat with the CEO of Equinor, Mr. Eldar Sætre, to hear his thoughts on how this transition will unfold going forward. Join me.
So the energy transition is based on two fundamental facts. First of all, climate change is happening as we speak. Last year was the warmest ever on the planet, and this year could be even warmer. And the second one is that energy is the main cause of CO2 emissions. More than 2/3 of global CO2 emissions come from energy, and 80% of that come from hydrocarbons. So this means, we need to see a transformational transition within energy, which is about getting away from hydrocarbons as much as we can, and with the most carbon-intensive parts of hydrocarbon and fossil fuels as the most important one. And the second part of the transition is to move away from molecules into electrons, so electricity, electrification, as much as we can. Now, electricity is around 20% today of energy. It could be 30, 40, 50, but still you're left with a big component that will be really tough to decarbonize. And that is the last component, really, to decarbonize significantly, really these tough segments, and which still might be stuck with oil and gas, and to take out as much CO2 as possible. And then, transition is also about, a more complex energy system, significantly more complex. There will be new players and many players and many technologies that will have to come together in a much more complex system. Well, Equinor has set really tough ambitions, and it's the headlines is about going in the direction of a broader energy company, and doing that we have to be consistent with and in line with the Paris Accord and the agreement. That's essential to us. These are the two pillars, and it's really based on still producing oil and gas, but with ever lower emissions. That's essential. The emitter pay principle. We have to take care of our own emissions in our own industrial processes. And then it's about the energy mix. That has to change to be consistent with Paris. So less oil and gas over time, significantly less as we move out in time, and significantly more renewable energy. So an energy mix that is consistent with the assumptions that we need to see to get to a net zero society. And then on top of that also the decarbonization efforts through CCS and so on. I think the opportunities for us is really to create a more resilient or an even more resilient company in the long-term horizon. This is really about the long term, and I'm talking about resilience from a financial perspective, from being part of society. So, and also from a shareholder value creation perspective, we need to change in line with what is expected from shareholders and where financials are heading, and then on this also about competitiveness. What are we to do? What we are good at. And we have a very low emissions in our operations. That is a really good starting point for us, increasingly a competitive advantage. And then offshore wind is an obvious, effort for us. On the threats, it is, I would say, lack of global collaboration is, we need extensive collaboration across societies, countries, businesses, industries to succeed with this, and that is also the biggest threat, that we don't see enough of that. And also add polarization, extreme use in both directions, and that is a challenge, because what we need to do is not look for the perfect, but we need to move forward with what actually works and actions that actually works now. So I say sometimes, let's make sure that the perfect doesn't become the enemy of the good. So that we will have to adapt the portfolio, partly within the existing assets, but also in how we shape the portfolio going forward. So we will produce oil and gas. The world is going to need oil and gas. It's a fact, and we will do that. But at some point, that production and the volumes that goes into oil and gas will have to shrink, and that means it will also be a higher focus on the quality of the oil and gas resources that we actually produce, and a more focused portfolio. Renewables is obviously extremely important, and we have indicated, factor of 30 times what we produce today from renewables by 2035. So really a strong, massive growth within renewables. So these are the main components for us in the transition, and obviously, we need technologies, we need digital solutions, both within oil and gas and within renewables. So there will be a lot of technology focus and digital focus in terms of developing these new type of solutions that the world needs. Balance is a key word, and that's also why we changed the name of the company to Equinor, to highlight the balancing issues that we need to strike, over time and wherever we are in this transition. So there are many things that can be said, but let's say a couple of them. One is there is a lot of ambitions and a lot of words. It's a long way to go. A lot of words on top of of this. So I sometimes split between actions, what we actually do, and the words and the ambitions. And it's really important that we see actions, things happening. And the competition is more on the actions than actually on the words that we see and the ambition. So I see, let's rather be long on words and on actions and short on words than the opposite. So, and then it's about value and volume. It's also, I see a lot of volume focus in this discussion, focus on gigawatts and so on. That's fine, but it's also equally important to ensure that value creation goes hand in hand, and it's a robust business model that supports this transition. I'm an optimist by nature, and to make the energy transition happen, we have to, be able to make profit. Otherwise, it won't happen. So this, will be a good, solid business. It's quite different from oil and gas, a very different risk profile. That is an issue for oil and gas, oil and gas companies, that they will incorporate different risk profiles into their portfolios. But I see significant returns, profits, value creation to be made from renewables. But it's going to be very competitive, extremely competitive. And what we depend on is actually opportunities. There's a lot of money that wants to go into renewables, and we need to see that the opportunities, there are enough opportunities supporting these money, creating these opportunities from that perspective. And then I also need to see costs continue to come down, and technology supporting those cost efficiencies. So that is essential, but definitely value creation to be had. But there will be good ones and not so good ones, and the tough competition. So we have to deliver accordingly. we cannot afford not to adapt. The planet cannot afford it, society cannot afford it, and companies cannot afford to adapt and relate to climate change and be part of what is needed. So for companies, it means a lot of changes. We need to adapt in order to be able to attract capital to our investments and developing our business. For shareholders to see a shareholder return in a long-term perspective. For talents to be attracted to our business. We depend on people. That is the most important resource we have, and they need to see companies with long-term ambitions that actually adapt to these realities. So the people and organizational issue is essential. People is our most important resource. They are going to make this happen, and we depend on the motivation and the competence that is needed. So I think, first of all, we need to maintain the pride of actually producing oil and gas. So this is, both oil and gas and renewables. So to keep that and not sort of run away from that and look upon that as something that is, left behind, that is really important. And then we are really lucky in this industry because we have such a deep fundamental competence. We can use that competence into renewables. That's what we have done. Basically, all of our people that goes into renewables, offshore wind, for instance, they come from oil and gas. A lot of, most competences are the same except for the subsurface. That doesn't exist within renewables. But beyond that, it's really been a successful business model. We need a couple of things on top of that. We need some subject matter experts within renewables. There are certain areas that are unique. We can build it. We can attract people into these competencies. And we also need a culture to build a culture, because this is a slightly different culture than what we have needed within oil and gas. It's really a tough, lower margin culture that we need to build within our type of companies. And that is maybe one of the toughest challenges, to ensure that we have business models and mindsets and a culture that can drive what is needed to be competitive in this environment. 3-4 years ago, I had a reshuffle of the values of Equinor, and I introduced collaboration as a core key value for us, one of 4 values. And I see collaboration and togetherness as really essential to actually succeed with the energy transition. It's important in respect of any kind of global challenge. The pandemic, for instance, the same. To succeed globally, you need that kind of collaboration. And it's also not only across nations, but also between society, regulators, politicians, and businesses, and across businesses. So that is essential, but also as a company. Because, technology sometimes, it will move across and will be available eventually for everyone. Business models will move around. But how you run a business and collaboration, I think that is really on top of what each individual, part of a member of our company can do, each individual employee. If they can collaborate, even more efficiently, I think that is a competitive advantage that I see, where we can actually distinguish ourselves from competitors. I think we see that actually works, and that is one of the ideas we have to really leverage those skills and collaboration even more extensively.
So Eldar, you talked about the ambitious goals for the company, but how do you see building an organization that fosters cooperation to drive this energy transition forward?
Well, that's maybe the best question there is, actually, because the people is our most significant and important resource, and we depend on our people to succeed whatever we do. So it is to be very conscious about this. You build a culture, and you can't have many cultures in an organization. But we depend on oil and gas and produce oil and gas, and we depend on people that are proud to produce oil and gas, and to ensure that our messaging, what we say, our strategy, supports that is essential. And then the good news is that we actually use the same people to deliver renewables project and produce renewable energy as we do within oil and gas. So it's the same deep competence that we can acquire, the same supply chains actually as well. So that is the good news. And then we need some experts, obviously, within within renewables, some specific areas, but I think the most significant thing we need is a culture that actually can do both oil and gas and renewables. And renewables is really a low margin business, so we have to ensure that that is really supporting every effort we do within renewables on the cost side, on the efficiency side, because it's really a tough competitive environment in renewables, as it is within oil and gas.
Eldar, you recently announced that you have decided to step down after more than 40 years within Equinor. How will the transition period look like over the next weeks and months?
Well, first of all, I made a decision. That was, I was recognized for changing my mind when I took on this role as CEO, and this time I'm not going to change my mind. I made a decision to basically step down now. Time is right, I felt, and it's still 2 months in this role, and I think one of the really important things for me is to stay focused in this role, not fading off in any way, being all in the role. It's a going business continuously. Then equally important for me is to do whatever I can to support Anders in his new role. And that's going to be a really tough, not a challenge obviously, but also a big change for him. And I have some experience, and if I can translate some of that experience into his pockets, I would be really glad to do so.
Sounds really exciting. Eldar, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for today.
Thank you, Eldar and Emil. I have relocated to the Geopark in Stavanger. This is a playground built of offshore equipment from the oil and gas industry. And children are playing here all day long. And speaking of youth, despite the dilemmas we've been touching on today, many young people choose to use their bright minds to develop the energy industry further. We asked some of them why. What is it about this industry that fascinates them? Let's have a look at their answers.
The reason I want to work with energy is because everything starts with energy. From where I am right now with oil and gas to your phone that you're holding in your hand or the jacket you wear. And the process in between that is incredible. And to me, it's really interesting. Can you imagine that what we're doing out here right now has a big impact on your everyday life? The question is just how can we do this as clean as possible? We work on that every day, and I can't wait to see where we're headed.
I work in the energy industry because this industry is one of the most advanced industries in our field. We work in Novotech with huge 3D models and make them available to anyone, anywhere. The oil and gas industry has, the last 10 to 15 years, built everything in 3D. All the oil rigs, everything subsea, and all their ships. So we help them with that challenge of making that data available. Without the oil and gas industry and the energy industry, I don't think the company would be in the place we are now, because the oil industry has, in many years, funded the development for products that go into other fields like medical, the building industry. And so we're happy to work with the industry, and we're also happy to see that they're willing to invest in new technology in the coming years.
The reason why I want to work with energy as a journalist is to make sure that energy to a greater extent gets an important role in the Norwegian media. I want to make energy a subject that is easier to understand without you having to know much about it from before.
The reason I want to work with energy is to be able to influence and contribute to how the world's energy demand will develop in the future. I believe oil and gas will still be central in the years to come, and that the industry will be an important contributor to the transition phase we are in, where innovation has never been more crucial. Working in exploration promotes collaboration and creativity, and to work in such an environment is truly rewarding. Exploring for gas, for instance, will be important for the future, and the conversion of gas to hydrogen is an example of how the industry is adapting.
I want to work with energy because we need energy regardless, and in this industry I get the opportunity to work with world-leading technologies that is also useful in other industries. We have an international environment where we work with great and diverse people from all around the world, learning about new cultures and new traditions. Thus, it is an honor to work with energy, where we might lead towards a sustainable future for future generations.
I have to say that I'm glad to see this young and solution-oriented optimism for the future and eagerness to solve important tech challenges going forward. This gives me a sense of hope.
Yes, definitely. I would say that attracting competence and talent is crucial for the energy industry. If you want to be the best, well, the best minds are needed. Therefore, it's important for the industry to understand how we can attract the new generation and keep them. When talking about attracting competence, I would say that it's a question of how we can tip the scales in favor of energy.
Another industry leader that needs to tackle this is Mr. Patrick Pouyanné. He is the CEO of Total. And he was challenged by a set of young people to answer their questions on climate change, the future of oil, and his take on the future of work.
Hello, Patrick Pouyanné. My name is Ariane Tenade. What are your thoughts on Greta Thunberg's actions and on the youth protests for the environment that have occurred in the past 18 months?
I think we need to listen to all these young people. I understand that this generation is really worried for our future because it's the future of this generation, and they feel that we are ourselves responsible for preparing this future. So I think it's important to listen to all of you, all the young which are questioning me today. But I also think that we should not be too much alarmist. You know, if you are afraid, we will not find a way to move and to act. And the most important, facing the challenge of the climate change, is to really act and to take actions.
Hello, Mr. Pouyanné. My name is Hugo. I'm worried about the climate. How can the energy industry be part of the solution to this crisis?
So, I think, of course, if I'm here today, it's because to tell you that, yes, the energy industry can be part of the solution. And why? But fundamentally, because it's, of course, energy is part of, it's at the core of the issue of the climate change. But more importantly, because I think we have the human, the technological, and the financial resources to support the energy transition. We know about it. Our people, our employees are really keen to find solutions, to invest in low-carbon electricity generated from solar and wind farms, to improve energy efficiency, and to develop, I would say, carbon capture and storage solutions. But of course, even if the companies are at the core of the solution, let's be clear, we cannot do it ourselves, alone. It's an issue which is I would say all society needs to pitch in. So governments, of course, have an impossible role, a clear responsibility, because they can set the policies, they can set the incentives that can help to shift the demand. And you know, in terms of energy, it's not only a matter of supply, it's a matter of supply, but also a matter of demand. So I think this is part of what, for example, the European government and the European Green Deal is about. And it's why we have decided in Total to put an ambition to, and we have announced last May, that we'll get to net zero in Europe by 2050, because we consider that the European continent and the European Union, with all the governments, will take the actions which will help us, I would say, which will give us a framework to be net zero by 2050. It's the companies are at the core of the energy transition, and what we want to build, Total will become a multi-energy company, you know, a broad energy company. And that's the roadmap that we set for ourselves. But to accomplish this ambition, we'll have, of course, to have the support of the government and also of the society and the customers. So it's a huge challenge for all of us, but we will manage if we are together, not if we oppose companies with other groups. It's together that we'll find the solutions.
Hello, Mr. Pouyanné. I am Stefania Aguirre and I have a question for you. All over the world, people want to take care of the planet, but costly energy is a real problem. So, how can we resolve this paradox?
So Stephanie is asking, I think, a very important question, a key question. because energy is at the core of any social and economic development. And so the affordability of energy is really very important, even as much as important, I would say, as the cleanliness and the environmental matters. And this will be the big challenge. How can we, on one side, transform the energy system, investing trillions of dollars, because it will require really trillions of dollars if we want to make this huge transformation. At the same time, keeping the energy affordable. For example, we face that issue in France, in our developed country, where purchasing power is higher. A lot of people, 3 million people in France, are eating themselves with fuel oil. And of course, it's a source of quite a lot of emissions. So we need to shift and to incentivize them to shift. It's part of the duty of a company like Total. We have 1 million customers, and we want to convince them to shift from eating fuel oil to natural gas or to electricity, which will be, of course, less emitting CO2 if it's coming from renewable power. But to do that, we need to find tools. And for example, we have put in place some interest-free loans in Total to give them, I would say, to go with them in that transformation. Otherwise, spending 10,000 euros to change your heating equipment, it's not so obvious for people. So it's a very important question which was raised by you, Stephanie. You are right. And the success of the energy transition will be clearly if we can, again, convince the people that not only it's good for them, if they will save money, and that at the end of the day they have to they are right to challenge and to invest for this energy of the futures.
Hi, Patrick. Moving on from oil, is it possible?
So, moving on from oil, that's a good question. Is it possible? The answer is not before a very long period of time. Why? Because in fact, oil is by far the most efficient source of energy today. You know, it's the most concentrated, the liquid one, the easiest to transport, the less costly as well, by far. You know, a liter of oil is much lower cost than a liter of water, you know. And so that's really the challenge that we face. But let's be clear, even in a 1.5 degree scenario, all people who are trying to forecast the future of the way energy will be produced on the Earth, on the planet, will still have oil in the mix. In 2050, when we speak about carbon neutrality by the second half of the century, we think that we'll have something like maybe 40 million barrels of oil per day of oil. It's not zero. It's much less than 100 million barrels of oil per day, which is the actual consumption. Clearly, we'll face a peak for the oil production by 2030, 2040, and will begin to decline, but we'll still require oil. And another important matter is not, in fact, not only speaking about oil, but speaking of the way to decarbonize the oil by mixing oil with biofuels. Biomass is a renewable source of energy, and we really think that we will see more and more biofuels coming in the mix, or e-fuels. You know, when you go from hydrogen, you will be able sooner than later to produce hydrogen from renewable sources, and that's the big first step in which we need to engage the mankind today.
Hello, I'm Emmanuel Anthony. We will be very interested to have your point of view on sustainability and profitability. Do you think that the green economy will allow companies to develop business models as profitable as hydrocarbons?
So, Anthony, I think you have also a good question, which is, and the answer for me is quite obvious, you know. Really be clear, the ecology does not progress if there is no economic results. You know, sustainability means not only having a green energy or clean energy, it means also investing a lot, but getting the cash out, which will allow us to reinvest. So sustainability means also some profits. And if Total is embarked clearly in this new way, in this new transformation, to spend more and more of these investments in renewable, for example, is because, of course, we have a strong not only belief, but we have demonstrated to ourselves during the last 5 years that we can do it profitably. By 2025, we will have built a gross capacity of renewable power, either from wind or solar, for more than 25 gigawatts. And the objective is to make more than 1 billion of cash out of that, 1.5 billion of cash out of that. I'll be clear, if we have engaged Total in a new roadmap with having targeting to become not only an oil and gas company, but also an electricity company, is because we think that the markets are changing, are promoting more and more electricity, and it will be the new source of profits for our group in the near future.
Hello Patrick, I'm Ekaterina and I would like to know how you feel about the future of the planet. Are you anxious about the matter or more optimistic? Thank you.
Hello, Katrina. I'm definitely an optimistic, you know. Churchill said that a pessimist sees a difficulty in each opportunity and an optimist sees an opportunity in each difficulty. That's a big difference. And I think why I'm optimistic is not just because by faith, it's because you have to believe in the progress. You have to believe in the capacity of the human being to invent, to change. You know, look, 20 years ago, I joined the industry, energy industry, a little more than 20 years ago. Nobody was speaking around me about solar, gigawatts of solar or gigawatts of offshore winds. Nobody was speaking about batteries in lithium-ion, and electric vehicles. Like today, we speak about becoming the new standard for our automotive industry. It was not true. So in 20 years, we have made a huge jump into the future. Why? Because in the meantime, the oil price went very high, and so it opens the way to develop new technologies. These technologies continue to progress. And one of the difficulties when we think the climate change is that we think to carbon neutrality with the technology we know today. But I'm absolutely convinced that we'll continue to find new technology. For example, capturing CO2 in direct air capture of CO2 will become a reality. And then if you can do that, that means that we can subtract CO2 from the atmosphere, and then the issue of the CO2 budget becomes easier to think. So I think that's why it's not a matter of complaining, and I am not at all supportive about people who think that we need to think of the future of the planet by less growth. I think on the planet, you know, you have a growing population with more people aspiring like us in developed countries to a better way of life. We need to bring them that better way of life. We need to bring them energy and to get them out of energy poverty. And all that we'll do it because we have to believe in the progress and in the technology. And in particular, all of us engineers in our companies, we are at the core of finding the solution. So my message to you, I would say all the young people, which we'll spend a few minutes there, I think it's up to you now. Not to believe that things will be easy. It will not be easy. It will not by pressing the button that you will find a solution. It's because you will make hard work and that you will use all your, I would say, capacities to find the solution for the planet.
That was a lot of important questions, reflections and answers. Thank you to Mr. Pouyanné and the young voices. The world, with its opportunities and challenges, looks different depending on where you are situated. We asked a selection of industry leaders to share their views on which opportunities and challenges they see emerging in the horizon.
It is absolutely clear that the coronavirus has accelerated the energy transition, a megatrend that has been well underway long before the pandemic started. The European majors have led the oil and gas industry's shift towards clean energies over the past few years, with Total, Shell and Equinor being further along the journey than most. But BP's recently announced bold strategy and clear pathway towards carbon neutrality has created a new industry benchmark. The move marked a breakthrough for the energy transition of the oil and gas sector.
The global energy market will be characterized by being much more renewable, much less emissions. So we will see that the pricing of carbon emissions will increase. Fuels will have to adapt accordingly, so coal will fall, less carbon-intensive fuels will be more valuable. But most importantly, it will be much more electricity, and a big share of that electricity will be renewable.
Well, I think there's so many aspects to talk about coming out of this. No doubt COVID will change markets. It will change the world. I think a few aspects to mention is look at behavior, look at consumer behavior, look at payment patterns as one, and how the value of digitization is appreciated. Economies that are well digitized have fared better than those who are not. This is accelerating changing trends many times over. So in many areas, it's increasing the pace of change.
Well, 2020 is a historic year for energy markets and a deeply challenging one. We're seeing some of the worst quarterly results reported in history. We're seeing large cutbacks in investment. We're seeing more pressure being placed, certainly in the U.S. shale patch at least, pressure from not just ESG pressures, environment, social and governance pressures, but also pressures to show more profitability and return. So all of these are weighing heavily on the industry at a time when oil prices, they have recovered in sort of this $45, $50 range where I think they'll probably be for a while. But even that is a tough place to be for many companies in the oil industry, and certainly for many states. Governments that depend heavily on oil revenue in the Gulf. Saudi Arabia is one example of a country that has the sovereign wealth reserves to weather this storm for a while, but oil prices in this range are painful, forcing budget cuts, forcing belt tightening, forcing it to draw down on its reserves, and that can only continue for so long.
I think the greatest opportunities in energy is about partnerships. I think within the industry, we need to partner so that we don't polarize the discussion. We have to partner the gas with the renewables. And I think it's also important that the industry partner with governments to make sure that we get the policies that incentivize the right technologies.
The crisis will open many new opportunities in the energy sector. While diversification into clean energy may not be the right way forward for every oil and gas company, the majors certainly have the skills, capabilities, and financial strength to drive the development of clean technologies and large-scale renewable projects. The majors also have an opportunity to become ambassadors of the energy transition in hydrocarbon-producing countries across the developing world, and most notably in Africa, which is also likely to suffer most due to the impacts of climate change.
I think the opportunities will vary depending on geography, framework conditions, and demand outlook for the market you want to serve. But I think the winner is always going to be the companies that are able to provide energy in an efficient manner, which also includes, of course, carbon footprint.
There will be a lot of great opportunities in the new technologies: wind power, solar power, batteries, hydrogen, and probably also in CCS technologies. But not only there, also in the IT systems that we need to control all this, to integrate it in a stable and reliable supply system. And further, the world will need oil and gas for a long time, so there will be opportunities also there. All in all, the energy demand on the planet will going to increase, while at the same time we are switching from high emission to a low emission system. In that transition, there will be a lot of opportunities, and I'm optimistic on behalf of the total energy industry.
Human competence, we as people, we increasingly become the most important competitive factor of our employers. At least that's the way I see it for DNB. And this changes the requirement. Of course, we look for people who have trained well and who have a lot of competence, but even more we're looking for skills. Because what you've learned at university, what you've learned in school in terms of knowledge, I mean, that's probably obsolete within a few years after you start working. So it's more about the skill set. How are you able to adapt? How do you live with uncertainty? How flexible are you, and how able are you to continue to learn? Because what we are on now is not education and then a work phase. I think it's actually a lifelong education alongside our work. So we say we look for people who are bold and curious and responsible. Those are the skills we look for when we hire people.
After seeing the coronavirus situation unfold, our next guest recently said, governments have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to transition to clean energy. Dr. Fatih Birol, Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, has had a clear message since the first days of the pandemic. Do not waste this chance.
I am really optimistic about the fact that this year may be a turning point for the energy world. A few things come together. The most important one is that the mindset of the people around the world is changing. They are understanding more and more how important it is to have a clean environment. So there's a change there in the mindset of citizens of the world. But at the same time, there are a few developments which make me helpful. Number one, the ever declining of the cost of clean energy technologies, especially solar, big decline in the solar cost, wind, including offshore wind and other clean energy technologies. The growing determination of governments around the world, driven by the net zero targets, but in some countries trying to address the air pollution, especially those in Asia. Another one is the several companies around the world, energy companies or technology companies, are changing their business portfolios, their strategies to address the climate change issue. To putting all of these things together, changing the mindset to the defects I mentioned, I am hopeful that 2020 can be a turning point in the history of energy. I think my definition of energy security is the same that I define as it was a definition in 1974 when the IEA was founded, providing the ability of providing energy to the citizens without interruption. So in 1974, the geopolitical concerns were the main concerns in terms of oil. They are still there. We were discussing the Hormuz Strait, closed or not closed, only a few months ago, which could have devastating impacts on the global economy. But they are not perhaps the most important concerns now. It is moving more to electricity security. In 1970s, 1980s, people built more and more coal-fired power plants to have secure electricity sources. And today, we are discussing in a context when there are major coal phase-outs around the world in the power generation that are replaced with solar and wind more and more, which are intermittent sources. How do we secure the electricity? So in my view, electricity security today is becoming a key issue when we talk about energy security. The geopolitical tensions among several countries around the world is almost at their maximum today. It makes the life difficult, not only for energy, but different parts of the economy and the social life. But I believe the technical expertise and the trust that many governments have for the IEA can help to bridge the gap between the nations.
Sometimes we need to be challenged. At ONS 2018, we invited Mr. Ramez Naam, co-chair of Energy and Environment at Singularity University. And he was tough on the oil and gas and energy industry, asking if we were pushing the transformation hard enough. We called Mr. Naam to let him comment on his thoughts from 2018.
There's really 4 stages for most new technologies in the energy transition. Stage 1 is they're expensive, they're policy dependent, they have to be subsidized. That's where solar and wind were from 1970 to 2015. Stage 2, they're cost competitive for new technology or for new deployment, where solar and wind are now cheaper to build than to build a new coal or gas plant. Stage 3, they're disruptive, where it's cheaper to build new solar or wind than to operate an existing coal plant, or where it's cheaper to switch your transport fleet to electric than it is to keep burning oil and maintaining your existing ICE fleet. And then stage 4 is some headwinds, some limitations that get into that. And so we're in those 4 phases. I've got an article on that. The 3rd phase of clean energy is the most disruptive yet that you can look up.
If we were talking about oil 10 years ago, we might have been talking about peak oil, right? Peak oil supply, but we don't talk about that anymore. Now what I'm concerned about is peak oil demand. What happened to coal? The world peaking in demand and going down. And this isn't a new idea. Back in 2000, we had the former Saudi oil minister, Sheikh Yamani, said publicly, the Stone Age didn't end for a lack of stone, right? Bronze tools were a disruptive technology. And what he's warning his fellow sheikhs there is the world will invent a disruptive technology that will disrupt the use of oil. And it will really be, I believe, the combination of 3 technologies: moving from buying cars to buying rides, autonomy, and electrification. And these 3 amplify each other.
Those 3 factors that I said in 2018 of disrupting oil demand have been joined by a 4th. So the first, electrification, electric transport will be cheaper to buy up front and cheaper to own and operate. 2 and 3, mobility as a service and autonomy, yes, they go together and they accelerate the transition. And 4, COVID has accelerated the digital work from home instead of traveling experience, and that joins those 3. Some interesting technologies that I would look at. Larger onshore wind. I'm now part of a startup called Radia doing mega onshore wind, overcoming logistical and transport limitations. That has the potential to be cheaper than offshore wind with similar capacity factors in many parts of the world. 2, long duration storage, seasonal energy storage, technologies like Form Energy, backed by Bill Gates' Breakthrough Energy Ventures. I think that's quite interesting. 3, resource plays, novel ways to extract lithium, especially a startup I'm part of called Energy X, working on that, but there are others like Lilac, funded by Bill Gates, and so on. And there's also plays being done for extraction of cobalt and nickel that we'll need for the electric mobility revolution. And 4, finally, software is the key to tying all of this together in a smart grid, in a smart mobility network. And so the biggest returns on capital actually happen not even in the hard tech, but in building networks, communities, network effects, virtuous cycles, using software and data to tie all of this together. And sometimes that turns into a fintech as well.
Cover your ass, which is watch out for your exposure to very, very rapid shifts in this marketplace, not just upstream, but the whole value chain, because we know that there's high sensitivity. 2, invest in the future. And like I said, I'm honored to be in a room with some of the most companies being most aggressive about investing in the future. 3 is experiment. Because you may think innovation just means designing new technology and going with it, but if you do that and it works every time, you're not being aggressive enough. If you look at Silicon Valley, what happens with the startup ecosystem, 60% of venture capital rounds go to 0. And only about 10% lead to 80% of the outcomes. If you want to produce the big wins, you have to take some risks, small risks at first, then successfully bigger risks, and be willing to face failure and learn from those failures. And 4, here is the hardest one. Don't wait to be disrupted. Disrupt yourself, even if it's painful.
I think the European energy sector is in the lead. European oil and gas majors, the CEOs of Total, Equinor, BP, Shell, and their executives just live in a world where they understand that climate change is real and they see the energy transition happening. And so they are leading, certainly compared to their American compatriots or their Middle Eastern ones, sorry to say. But I'd say they get a C at best. there is still room for a lot more leadership in this space. And I'm not saying it just for the good of society, though of course that's vital. I'm saying it for your future as an entity. There is a past and there is a future. The world's demand for energy is going to keep rising, but it's not going to be for fossil fuels. And so the choice remains, are you an oil and gas company or are you an energy company? And if you are, people need to still move faster and more aggressively into especially electrification.
Thank you, Ramez, for interesting reflections. Another thinker on the future is Mr. Michael Liebreich, the founder of Bloomberg New Energy Finance. We asked him to share his reflections on the effects of the pandemic, what energy companies should do right now, and his views on sustainable finance.
The COVID-19 pandemic really hit the energy sector like a heart attack. And you saw these very dramatic and very rapid, unprecedented falls in demand for every energy source, electricity, fuels of all sorts. And of course, we all know the oil price went negative because of the rapidity of developments. It is now coming back. It won't come back fully to where it was before until the global economy recovers. And I've thought from the beginning that that would take probably a year or two. Of course, faster if we have a vaccine, slower if we don't. But the really interesting question is changes in the structure of the economy that might have a long-term impact on energy demand. So will we travel less? Will there be less business travel? Will we work from home more? So will people be allowed to stay working at home maybe 2-3 days a week, maybe altogether? And that will change the demand for energy. Even things like home or remote medicine, we've now changed completely the way we provide medical services. And that's going to have an impact on the number of journeys. We don't know to what extent those behaviors will be sticky. I'm pretty sure that quite a few of them will be sticky because we're actually, despite the stress of the pandemic, in some cases enjoying these new ways of working. And there's been new technologies delivered to enable those behaviors. Video conferencing has come along already in the last 6 months in leaps and bounds. So has medicine, so has homeschooling. So there's going to be some stickiness because of that. And that's going to contribute to pulling forwards peak oil demand, peak emissions earlier than would otherwise have been the case. Andy Grove, the legendary CEO of Intel, said that a crisis will destroy a weak company, that a good company will survive a crisis, but a great company will be defined by a crisis. And this sort of discontinuity that we're seeing, of course, we've all got to get through the next year or two until hopefully things will return to some kind of new normal. But there are also opportunities. We are also seeing some acceleration of trends that were in any case apparent, that are powerful trends that themselves contain opportunities as we shift to a lower carbon energy and transportation system. And there are also new opportunities that have become apparent in the last 6 months. We're worrying much more about resilience. Are there opportunities in providing services that help to future-proof the economy, not just from pandemics, but against all sorts of shocks that we now understand will profoundly challenge our way of life and our way of working. I can't tell you in your own businesses what those opportunities are, but I can tell you that the companies that I've been talking to and working with over the last 6 months have in many cases, shifted from protecting their existing business to thinking about what the future looks like and what new opportunities that's going to open up. What we've seen over the last decade is clean energy and transport technologies go from very marginal, used to be called alternative energy, to mainstream. Nearly 3/4 of all investment in electrical generating capacity over the last year has been renewables. Now, that has meant that we've got 11% wind and solar and non-traditional renewable energy generation in the electricity mix. And we're now seeing sales of electric cars reaching 5, 6, 7% in a lot of major markets. But the real question is, will those trends now accelerate, or will we get saturation? Saturation if it becomes too difficult to manage renewable variability. Saturation if only some people can afford or can use electric cars. I think we're going to see acceleration. What I've seen over the last nearly 2 decades tracking this sector is continuing cost drops and, very importantly, continued innovation in the technologies and solutions that complement the penetration of clean energy and clean transportation. So whether it is batteries, whether it is charging infrastructure, whether it is machine learning to be able to deal with these new types of infrastructure, types of technologies, those innovations are also accelerating and enabling deeper and deeper penetration of these clean solutions. Now, the last 10, 20% to go net zero is going to be very, very difficult. Some industrial sectors are very, very difficult. Getting through winter might be very, very difficult. And so we've got a lot of innovation, a lot of opportunity, a lot of work to do for that last 20%. But I see no doubt whatsoever that we will go from where we are, which is, let's call it 15% of the way into this journey, to get to that point of being 80% into that journey is going to go pretty quickly. The trend towards a lower carbon, ultimately a net zero economy, is creating enormous upheaval in the financial sector. It's also being driven by upheaval in the financial sector. So you've got this shift from business models that were well understood, oil, gas, coal, 100 years experience, to new business models where there are zero marginal cost solutions in energy, electricity, and transportation. And so the risk profile is very different. The return profile is very different. The new skills, new pools of capital have to be created. But at the same time, we are seeing that trend pushed now by the financial sector in a way that 10 years ago you simply didn't see. 10 years ago, the financial sector said, you come up with the solutions, we'll try and finance it. Now, the financial sector is in the lead, pushing companies, pushing consumers to reduce emissions. There's plenty of capital available. Even after COVID, which will have destroyed a lot of savings, there will still be plenty of capital available. So I think we're going to see this mix of the real economy and the financial system solving for reduced emissions at an accelerated pace. And it's very exciting.
Mille, we are getting towards the end of this energy show, but what have we learned?
Well, at least from my point of view, I see an energy industry not unaccustomed to change, but which is facing a reality far more complex than ever before. The climate is changing, Energy demand is increasing and there's a global pressure building. I think we all see that actions are needed now.
And I believe that the energy industry has the tools to meet the global development challenges with new business models and commitments by providing safe and viable technical solutions, operating safely and making profits. In other words, using our muscles as a force for progress.
I think we're describing an industry with long traditions of working together, and I trust industry to see collaborative solutions going forward. These challenges cannot be solved without the energy industry, just as much as the industry cannot continue thriving unless they stay on top of this development.
Mille, it was a pleasure to host this together with you.
And the same to you, Emil. And to everyone watching at home, thank you so much. And stay tuned for more content at ons.no all week.